like to make a motion that we approve the agenda for tonight's meeting, April 1st, 2014.
Okay, which agenda are you?
Yeah, which agenda are you?
I would like to approve the shorter yellow one.
Thank you.
Okay. Nice try, Kathy.
Hi.
One of them was a
Put a
resolution.
whole bunch of stuff on there for us.
A resolution.
We reviewed it ahead of
No
time and
diet.
it was
Yeah,
ridiculous.
no diet day.
Yeah, that needed to stay on there. And there was a golf date on there too.
There was a zucchini day.
Yes.
There was a,
And Hug an Aussie day.
oh, hello, I will.
Second,
We have a motion by that. Second by Jay. All in favor?
Aye.
Fine.
Any opposed? Okay. Our consent items tonight, minutes and paid vouchers. Any discussion?
I do have one question. On the vouchers, it shows that we have drug testing, and is that all departments or is that just some departments?
I'm going to answer to the best of my knowledge, and you guys can verify if I'm not being right or not. For those that have CDL licenses, they're required to have drug testing.
Oh, of course.
And then we have, if we have a certain incident or somebody gets in a car accident or something, or has some sort of safety accident, then we have them be drug tested. So
We currently do not have a citywide random drug testing policy.
Sure it's not the police department's sampling.
Any further discussion?
yes, for sure.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that we approve the consent items.
I'll second.
Motion by Cindy, second by Diana. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now it's an open session. This is if we have an item, if you have an item that's not on our agenda for a public hearing or some other item that you'd like to discuss, you're welcome to come up and take the podium. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Pete Blake. I live at 29 South, 2000 West.
Is that working, Pete?
I don't know if you
Yeah, if you talk right into it,
can be up any higher.
if you move the top here, that moves. This doesn't.
Oh.
There you go.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm here tonight, I guess in my capacity as the neighborhood chair for the Sam White Lane neighborhood. Most of the property that is part of Sam White Lane neighborhood was annexed into the city in 1993, almost 21 years ago now. As part of that annexation, there was a resolution passed by the city, Resolution 93-3, which gave to the property owners in that area certain rights and certain promises, I guess you'd call them, as part of the city's desire to encourage us or to entice us to agree to the annexation. One of the terms of that resolution reads as follows: be it further resolved that the present designated zoning is rural residential. Any future zoning changes will take place as property owners apply for and are granted zone changes on their property. I have had a member of the neighborhood, one of my neighbors, desires to tear down his existing house and to rebuild a new home for himself and his wife. And in talking to the city officials, he was told that because of new zoning that applies down there, that he would not be able to do that. He would have to apply for a zoning variance and pay a fee and so forth. So my question is this agreement still in force? I think this was something that the city and the residents down there agreed on in good faith with one another. The city got the property, which was what it wanted, and of course that property is now being developed and businesses and so forth are being still hold this agreement to be binding upon the city. And if it were the case that this man were living in a rural residential zone, there shouldn't be any problem with him tearing his house down and rebuilding it. So what I would ask of you folks to do, not tonight of course, but sometime in the future, to sit down and discuss whether this resolution is still in force, and to come to some conclusion, and then to convey that to the members of the neighborhood. Any questions on that?
So, Pete, we're not able to actually make any decisions, right, and take action, because it's just an open session. But I believe we can ask questions.
Okay.
So are you saying that it's your understanding that that agreement allows the residents to have rural residential in perpetuity? Is that what you're?
My understanding of the agreement, at least as I read it, is that the property would be zoned rural residential until such time as property owners apply for and are granted zone changes. That's the wording in the resolution.
Okay. And are you saying that no property owner has made requests to change it from RR to something else?
To the best of my knowledge, that's correct. There are other provisions of the resolution that talks about our use of the ground for agricultural purposes, talks about hunting rights, talks about use of septic tanks and wells for culinary water, and so forth. And so we're concerned, I guess, that if the city is not going to uphold the resolution, then are we in jeopardy of losing the right to use our wells for water, the right to use septic tanks, so forth. So we're just concerned that the city is not upholding its end of the agreement.
Okay. So there's only a couple things we can do. We can't really take action, but we can ask our staff to work with you and look into this, and then come back to the council with, with the recommendation on where we stand.
Sure.
So Scott, do you want to go ahead and make that assignment? And
Yeah.
it
No, I'll
may
take that.
require other people.
Obviously, we'll have Tina involved in Dagan
Can.
and Ken.
We may want to, Tina, I don't know, we have had discussion on this already.
I've already looked at the agreement.
Okay.
And part of the decision, talking to his neighbor, was based on my interpretation of the agreement. I'm happy to clarify outside the meeting, maybe we will discuss it.
Okay.
I'm happy to clarify what the interpretation was.
I'm aware of what her conclusion was. I guess we just don't agree with it. The other property owners feel like we should take the agreement at its face value, and that the property should be treated as rural residential until we personally request a zoning change.
What was your interpretation, Tina?
Well, the city rezoned it. All property owners were given notice of the time to rezone, so they should have come in and talked to them at that point. I think it was, quite frankly, simply a drafting error on the person's part, whoever drafted it back in 1990. Really, just not anticipating that it might come up for a rezone in the general rezone later on with the city. He just didn't anticipate that there was another way that the zoning could be changed. I've spoken with the neighbor, and he's not satisfied with the answer. I want to keep him out, and we can talk about it. Ken and I have already talked about it. It's prime commercial property. Does the city want to allow somebody to rebuild a home in property that will hopefully within the next 5 years want to be commercial? And does that property owner want to be surrounded by commercial uses in 5 years? So, the other property around it will be developed. It's already starting to be developed.
Scott, can you take this offline then and
Sure.
make sure the appropriate people are discussed, and then if there's anything that's going to come from this that we need to be able to act on, if you could put it on the agenda?
Yeah, I think what we need to do is clarify kind of what our message has been so far, let the council know, so that if the resident wants to come in and, in essence, appeal to the council on the interpretation of our city attorney, then you'll have the background information, and then we can move
Well,
forward.
but I think this goes further than just the one person who wants to put a house up. I think all of the property owners down there who were party to this original agreement, the annexation agreement, are concerned that the city is not going to honor this resolution. This was given to us as part of the whole annexation process. And now, if there's a new reading on it from the city's point of view, we're very concerned about that. So we take the wording at face value. I don't know what else we can do. So anyway, if you
So what I'm gonna ask is for Scott to work with his team, involve you and whoever else from your neighborhood need to be involved in that, and then also advise you as to what your recourse of action might be, and then have them bring that back before the council as something that we can actually work on. Okay.
Mayor, would you be opposed if I was included in those conversations
Not at all.
and such?
No.
I would like to.
Would anyone else from the council like to participate?
I would.
Okay, so why don't we have Diana and Cindy? Okay. All right. Thank you, Pete. All right, anyone else for open
Mayor and
session?
Council, this will be our 16th year, I believe, in a row for Tree City USA. And this year we'd like to plant 16 cherry and maple trees at the Manila Discovery Park. Finish off the Ball Diamond Pathway. So that's kind of our goal this year. It's one of the steps in achieving Tree City USA to have a proclamation.
Okay.
Is a scout kind of is this going to be a project like most of them are that?
Yeah. Yeah, we have Bryson Carter, he signed up. We've been working with the Beautification Commission the last 2 months, and trees have been ordered. He'll go and pick those trees out, I believe, in 2 weeks.
So we normally read the proclamation? Okay. Any questions for Dion? Okay, I'm going to read the proclamation. It says, Proclamation, Arbor Day, April 26, 2014. Whereas Arbor Day is observed throughout the nation, and whereas trees provide beauty to the community, and whereas trees provide valuable shade from the hot summer sun, and whereas trees can reduce the erosion of topsoil and produce oxygen and provide habitat for wildlife, and whereas trees are valuable in purifying the air in Utah's arid climate, and whereas having beautiful trees planted in the community is an important matter to the citizens, and whereas the city was named Pleasant Grove because of a beautiful grove of trees and reflects the appreciation for our forefathers had for them, and whereas Pleasant Grove as Utah's city of trees continues to be characterized by the scenic landscape that trees provide. Now therefore I, Mike Daniels, Mayor of Pleasant Grove City, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim that the citizens observe April 26, 2014 as Arbor Day by joining the Beautification Commission at Manila Park at 8 a.m. for a tree planting ceremony, and further urge everyone to plant a tree. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make the motion that we proclaim April 26th as Arbor Day, our 16th planting of the trees.
Okay, we have a motion by Cindy,
I'll second that.
second by Diana. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay. To consider for adoption a resolution 2014-010 authorizing the Pleasant Grove City Parks and Recreation Department Director to submit application for the 2014 Utah County Commission Municipal Recreation Grant for improvements to be made to recreational facilities throughout the city and providing for an effective date.
Mayor and council, this year, the grant's valued at just under $20,000. We looked at improving one of our playgrounds. Generally, playgrounds run, a very cheap playground runs about $20,000. So we looked at a bunch of different options. We'd like to propose 10 pet cleaning stations for the Murdoch Trail system through Pleasant Grove. This has been one issue I know the police department and we've had comments on is the waste along the trail system. This would provide the citizens trash receptacles for their pet waste. The other thing we would like to do is 2 shade covers similar to the pavilions, but they're more of a cloth material for the swimming pool, the surf area, and then also one for the Manila Creek Beach. And then 1 small piece of playground equipment to go in the Hosmer Park.
All of that fits in that?
Yes. Well, we're over a little bit, but a couple $100 is all, so yeah.
Okay, questions for Dion?
Is there any match required on it?
Not on this grant, no.
What's the chances?
Oh, 99.9 usually.
So we've gotten them in the past.
Yeah, we've done pavilions, we've done picnic tables, we've done multiple things in the past with this grant.
What does it take to qualify for this grant?
So the grant is based off of the tourism tax in the county, and they divide it up population-wise throughout the county, different cities. It has to be used for recreation or tourism. I know one time we applied and we were turned down, we just changed our approach for something different.
Do people not apply for the grants? Is that why you're pretty much guaranteed it?
No, it's kind of a, I don't know, just a process, but we can actually hold off a year and turn that money back to the county and utilize that the following year. We can add it up, but we can only add it up twice. So, no, it's just pretty much everybody uses it. The only time I have seen cities not use it is when they want, like something that's 40,000 every 2 years. So they want to apply that there, they'll just write a letter, but see if they can move it next year.
So it's not a competitive grant?
No, it's not.
It's more of a,
It's
as long as your project meets the
Right.
criteria, then it's approved.
Right, and it's all based off of our population.
Other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move we adopt resolution 2014-010 authorizing the city Parks and Rec Department director to submit application for the 2014 Utah County Commission Municipal Recreation Grant for improvements.
Okay, we have a motion by Jay,
I'll second it.
second by Diana, by voice. Diana?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Is that by resolution, just to verify that the council had to give support?
Yes.
You're part of that.
Okay, item C is a discussion on the pipe plant property. Who's leading this discussion? John's leading.
Well, John's gonna do his thing, but let me kind of introduce a little bit. We've talked in the past about a master plan for the pipe plant property, which we purchased in July of last year. We had some initial meetings with staff to come up with some master planning ideas. We presented those to council in January, I think it was January. And we reached, in some ways, some conclusions in regards to what we should do. And what we want to focus on tonight is really the size of the detention basins. One of the issues is whether we want to have public works out there or not. And I don't know if we necessarily need to decide that tonight. We would like to get a feeling for how big those detention basins are so that we can consider constructing. We'd like to do both. I don't know if we have enough money to do both, but at least one of those detention basins within the next year. So as we, most of the consideration is going to be on about half the property, about 20 acres. And if we want to have some preliminary discussions about the use of the other property, we can have that as well. But I think the one thing we want to kind of have decided tonight is how much footprint we want for the detention basins. Is that fair, John? Is that kind of where we're at? That's what we've talked about.
And I don't know that I have a presentation tonight, I'm just gonna have the figure up here that we can talk to. This was our preferred alternative that we had discussed previously. And it was I guess you could say, a hybrid between the smallest footprint we could come up with the deepest amount of water, and the most shallow amount of water with the largest footprint. We came up with something in between, so that we could expand and deepen it in the future and get more capacity for stormwater, but it wouldn't take up as much of the footprint and leave a larger chunk available for other uses. So this figure includes 2 basins. They would get a large feed of stormwater from the north on 6th West, and also a large one eventually from the east on 400 North. And we'd also talked about a lot of dual use, multiple uses in these facilities, parks, soccer fields, a detention, or a secondary water pump station where we could utilize some of the stormwater and put it out into the secondary system to use for irrigation. Possibly cemetery ground, parks and rec area, possibly public works, parking, and other uses through there. But specifically, these were the 2 basins that we had discussed.
So we also have a cost estimate as to construct both of those basins. We have a cost estimate as to sodding, putting in irrigation and sod, or putting in irrigation and seeding. And then we have a cost on the booster, secondary water booster station. So that's in your Dropbox folder. We just looking, if we were to build the basins, and when we're talking about the 3.6 million that we have in here, does that include getting it from 1100 North into the?
Yes, the initial estimate that was given there, that includes the 2 basins and whatever facilities we need in those basins for them to operate as detention basins. And it also includes the main trunk line, which is a large trunk line up 600 west to 1100 north. And the reason we need to do that is because we can't really put any stormwater in the basins until we get the stormwater there. So we have to have those facilities as part of that infrastructure. There will be additional facilities in the future that will bring stormwater from the east and other areas too, but that's the main feed would be from the north. And it also includes it doesn't include any irrigation for the detention basins. It includes natural, native seed mixtures that would just need to be mowed a couple times a year, and minimal maintenance, just the basics for stormwater detention. And then the other estimates include, okay, if we want to make this a dual-use facility for parks and other things, this is the additional that we need to put into the project.
Okay, let the record show that Councilmember Lamone has arrived.
Sooner rather than later.
So
We're hoping to get that all done for that 2 million, but now at this point, if we want to develop one of those basins, then we have enough money to probably do one of them.
So looking at the 3.1 number, how do you break out just one facility versus both?
Yes, and I can run those numbers. It's based on volume of dirt that we've got to move. It's based on the amount of seeding and the pipe to get to those various basins. It also includes curb and gutter and sidewalk all around the perimeter of wherever we do our work. and also the street widening that's required. So whenever anybody develops in the city, we would ask them to put in street widening, curb gutter, and sidewalk. So this wouldn't be any different. We would need to put those, that infrastructure in as well. So if we break out just to one or other of the basins, I can break out the cost fairly easily on what it would be for one of them.
And so we don't have that number obviously tonight, but if the council wants us to move that direction, we can have that number when we, I mean, obviously before we adopt our final budget, if that's the direction we want to go. If the council says, let's let this, you know, let's clean it up and just kind of let it be for now and use that storm drain money for other properties, then that's another consideration.
Well, cleaning it up would not entail sprinkler system
No.
and any kind of ground cover.
We're just talking about clearing the buildings on there and getting it in a place where we could mow it twice a year, just to
You
keep the
mow
weeds down.
weeds?
Yeah, mow weeds.
Okay.
That's the smallest amount of money that we would probably absolutely need to spend on that property, that option.
So, we talked about alternative uses in addition to, or not alternative, joint uses, shared uses, and that would involve Parks and Rec. Are there funds from Parks and Rec that could assist with their part of this?
Yes, and we don't have the cost on the road or the restroom and Tot Lot in there, but we do have park impact fee money, which we can use for that. We have about $1 million. Some of it we need to build a second ball field in Shannon Fields, which we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about capital. But we would pull from that fund to build parking lot, road, and those things necessary for us to run recreation programs.
So is there an option in order to not spend money twice? Is there an option to develop one of the two facilities and ask Parks and Rec to take care of the surface grass and whatnot for the dual use?
Are you talking about building one basin and landscaping that for soccer, but then taking the other piece of property and just putting irrigation and grass on that and using it in the short term?
Sort of,
Okay.
sort of. So it seems a waste that we would not build something and yet prep the land with anything,
Sure.
right? But if we have enough funds to build one of the facilities, we still need, if we want to use it for dual use, we still have to prep that surface in order to be used for dual use. So since that would be a Parks and Rec function, the dual use part, maybe they could cover the cost of the grass and the irrigation. And then the second parcel, the second piece that's going to be developed, I don't have a clear thought on this, but you have to look at what it would cost to construct that out, since you're not doing both at the same time, how long it would take us before we could do that, and then make a decision on whether we seed and irrigate that until the time comes that we have the funds to develop the second facility.
Yeah, I would say we could look at maybe the Parks and Rec impact fee to landscape the facility that we're going to build. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
So we'll need to, we have that cost. The question is because we have other needs, are we going to use all the impact fee money on this? And so we just need to come up with that number.
Yeah, I
to
think
see
right
if
now
that's
we're
possible.
talking about what's possible.
Yes,
And then after we know
then we can
all of
decide,
what's
right?
possible,
Yeah.
we decide on which ones make the best sense.
So is there any thoughts from the council that we don't do anything here and we just use that money to buy other properties? Or is the council okay that we proceed on building one of the basins and breaking down? When I say proceed, we get you more information to make a decision as to whether this is possible.
I have a question. When we were in discussion of buying the pipe plant, and John came in and explained what all of our needs were and why we'd buy the pipe plant versus taking it clear down to the Grove and all of that discussion. At that point, what was decided would be the use of the pipe plant at that point when we made the decision to purchase the pipe plant. Plus, what was it that we determined was the needs of our storm drainage at that point? So I just want to recall what it is. Are we choosing two? Because that's the purpose of why we bought the pipe plant. Are we choosing two because that is why we, in the discussion as to why we're buying the pipe plant? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just don't want to get off of what our vision, what our purpose was in buying it in the first place. It's like buying a house and then already we're extending or having other uses. I just would like to know that whole,
So the storm drain discussion
in a
was,
nutshell.
we wanted to purchase property to store water somewhere else in town so we could free up space in the grove.
Right,
So that's where the pipe plant really highlighted itself as a good alternative. As John did that analysis, he identified that 20-acre footprint for ponds. So that's, both of these ponds, if you build both basins, you address that need.
okay, so
Which was our intent all along,
when,
yeah.
that was our intent, that's all I wanted to know, is the intent of purchasing it is those two ponds that we're still looking
Yeah.
at?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not encroaching on, I mean, the main reason we bought it was for storm drain, the
Sure.
others are ancillary uses.
Sure,
So we're taking care of our storm drain needs by what we have proposed.
okay,
But if you do delay, if we do one now and one later, then we will have a certain amount of water that we're not capturing up here, which then impacts what's going on in the grove.
Right, and I have a question. Is this the right time for that? So I have a couple of scenarios, so bear with me while I think this through in my head. So, of course, I would love to have the basins there. I know that there's been some talk about not having public works there, and I just want to express a fear. I think that we're running out of space to put public works somewhere else. And the land that would be available now, once some announcements are made about development so for example, if we put them someplace else west of where they are right now, that land right now is about 200,000 an acre. And I think that once the announcements are made of some economic development in the Grove area, that land is going to go for 500,000 an acre. So I'm very fearful that we're going to spend money developing some basins, using all of the funds that are available now, and then not have any land or any money to buy public works and acreage.
Can you address that with the map you have there? Let's see.
Well, if I can jump in. The funds are storm drain funds. They're not funds that we can use to build a public works
Yeah.
facility or buy property for public works.
Yes. Okay, and I understand that, but we're using it for Parks and Rec.
Well,
No.
the Parks and Rec stuff, we're using park and rec impact fees for that.
Okay.
So
Okay, but so the land was bought, all of the 40 acres was bought with storm water money. We're only gonna use 20 acres of it for storm water. So the other
Some of it
20
was paid with cemetery.
Okay, yeah, cemetery impact fees, okay.
Well, just cemetery and fees, yeah. There's a little bit. Go ahead.
But just so, I
Okay,
mean,
but do you see my fear is that we're not gonna be left with any money, and we're not gonna put public works there, and then we're not gonna have any money to buy some land for public works later.
So this money can be used to buy land for public works. This money has to be used on the storm drain basin. So money for public works is a whole different discussion, because that's a discussion regarding the rest of the enterprise funds and the general fund, because of all the multi-uses that public works has. I think the important part right now is what we're deciding is what is our footprint for those basins, and if we want to build one now, it does not impact the future, that we still have that option to move public works there. We're still going to have to figure out the funding source to do that, But the money we're talking about on the table right now can't be used for that.
For acquiring land. Okay.
So
Well,
Diana brings up a good point, and it's something I struggled with my very first year in public office, and it's probably something that we can explore a little deeper as we talk about the budget. But there's a general fund, which is the money we bring in from sales and property tax. Then there's a whole bunch of other money over here that's broken up into individual enterprises, and money that's brought in can only be used within that enterprise. And so when we talk about this particular parcel of land, the original decision was mostly the storm drain fund on this side and partly the Parks and Rec fund on this side. None of it comes from the general fund. So when we talk about where does money come for public works, that's going to have to come either in part, depending on what public works funds there are, or from another source. And there isn't any, I think is kind of what
I would
they're
look at it
saying.
as the storm drain, of that 40 acres, the storm drain owns 80% of it. The cemetery owns about 20%. And so, I mean, the truth is, if Public Works if we did want to locate Public Works, they'd almost have to buy it from the storm drain fund. If that makes sense, so.
But because the Public Works building is dual use for all those enterprises, that cost would be broken up, some would come out of water. So,
And for me, the integrity of what we bought the pipe plant for somewhat overshadows the fact that now there's a great need for public works, but that wasn't in the original discussion of what was gonna happen with that land and the purpose of that land.
yeah, so when we started master
But
planning
not
it,
undermining the fact that public works has got big issues that
Sure.
we need to be dealing with.
so when we started master plan, after we purchased the property, so the initial intent, we did not talk about public
No.
works. After we purchased it, then as staff, we sat down and started master planning it. We said, here's a chunk of property that we could use for, it could be cemetery, it could be parks only, and then that's when the discussion of public works came up. Does it make sense to move public works out there? So in some ways, yes, it does. So we had that discussion. That was, we created 5 different proposals. A couple of them had public works there. So that land is not going to be impacted. We're going to get our storm basins in. That's the whole reason we really went down this road. So I don't think we have to decide whether public works is going there even this year, because the property's still going to be unencumbered. But when the time comes for us to have the discussion about when we want to expand public works or move them, and that property's still available, then that's when we have that discussion. Because to me, we go back to our priority list, public safety building, roads, library, public works, what's the order of how we're going to do those things? In some ways, public works is going to be a little bit easier because we get help from the enterprise funds when all the other ones are more general fund related.
Sorry, I just saw a lot of money flying out the door, and I was just like.
Yep, and the issue is that can't be used for the public works at this point.
So the buildings that are currently on the property, because I know Public Works uses some of those to store, equipment or vehicles. If they're not, I know they're not the prettiest buildings, but if they're using them right now, are we able to keep 1 or 2 of those buildings on the property so they can continue to use them for storage?
Yeah, if they're not in the footprint of the basin that we need to build, yeah. That's the decision we can make as we determine what buildings to tear down. If we're using them, if Public Works is using them now, we don't need to tear them down. But if they are in that footprint, then they'll eventually need to come out so that we can build the basin.
So I was a private citizen at the time when the decision was made. My understanding was 40 acres of land became available. There was a great need for facilities for storm drain. So storm drain funds were used to acquire the 40 acres plus bonding. After that decision was made, then programming went into effect to design what does the footprint of the facility look like. And after 2 or 3 iterations, it comes down to about 20 acres. Is that what I'm
For the storm
understanding?
drain needs, yes.
Yes. Right, so that means that if this, can you go back to your other, if this is the footprint then on the left that's chosen for the storm drains, that's adequate to meet the need and the purpose for why the land was acquired. That means now we have this other land that has, except for the cemetery, no defined purpose yet.
Yeah, and we haven't even determined how much of that's gonna be cemetery. I mean, we do know a portion of it, but we haven't really sat down and said, is it 5, 10 acres, 15 acres, or whatever. That's kind of phase 2 of the master plan.
Right. So in the initial focus, when we're talking about storm drain, this is the current proposal, is for those two facilities, and that would be adequate to cover the proposed storm drain need. for the
Yes,
area.
this will meet the master plan for the area, for the city, and one of the huge needs to try and pull a lot of the storm detention needs up from the south,
Away from more expensive land.
away from more expensive land. And if I may, if you're ready, I'd like to discuss the more expensive land a little bit further.
Before you do that, I had another question about the design of this. Could you have designed it in 3 basins?
Yes.
And wider?
Yes,
You could have designed it all in 1 basin and deeper.
that's correct.
You chose this one, why?
Economy for a couple of reasons. The topography or the ground slope across the property just lends itself to splitting it up. If we built all one great big basin, we'd have a huge berm down on the bottom and large excavations up on the top. So we've got 2 basins that are sitting
Right.
kind of offset, and try to minimize excavation and fills and different things like that.
So tiering,
Tiering them, yes.
yeah, storing water in multiple places.
Well, so for the top basin, it flows into the bottom basin.
It does,
When they're both, after they're both constructed.
I have one other thing, and it might be leading into what you're gonna maybe talk about. But now that we have this storm drainage, or that we anticipate we're having this happening on the pipe plant, so does that mean now with the properties in the Grove area, each property owner will be required to maintain their own?
Okay.
Is that leading into what you?
Partially, but we
Okay.
can talk about that. Every commercial property or non-residential property has to detain their own stormwater. They create detention areas and release it at a controlled rate. But that doesn't eliminate the need for city regional basins. Now, in the master plan, we wanted to move as much of the regional stormwater detention from this area as we could up north, because this area is a lot more expensive. And we did that to the best of our ability. But we can't move everything because rain falls down here too. And it falls down below our main detention at the pipe plant. So beyond what the individual properties will detain, we have roads and other things and city improvements that we need to detain on. And the main outlet for the whole city for stormwater is right in this area here. This is 700 South, Sam White Lane, this is Proctor Lane, and this is our interchange over here. The main storm drain outlet is here. And the capacity of the channel down through Linden is limited. And so what we've shown in the master plan is in this area, we've got to have additional stormwater detention somewhere in this area, around the outlet, so that we can meet our obligations to our neighbor city and not flood them every time we get a big storm. But this is some expensive area down here. And we've eliminated a lot of the area down south that we need detention with this new master plan, but not all of it. And so when we talk about spending all the money up south on the pipe plant property and building those basins now, we still have land needs in this area. So it's a question of, do we wait on those land needs and risk that it goes up in cost? Or do we buy it now? I don't know.
So John, is that the only piece that we would need right now in that area, is right there, or do we need other pieces too?
Down in this area, I believe that's about it. We have a few other pieces throughout town that we need to obtain still, but
The only other thing would be the channel to the lake from our I-15 crossing.
That's correct.
So that drains that very lower part down by the interchange.
Was that facility put in, the pipe?
We have the larger pipe under the.
It was put in.
So we paid
Yes.
for that with the I-15 project.